Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, no doubt, starts now. This, my fellow Americans, is the broadcast for April the 23rd in the year of our Lord 2025. This is our one of two, and the goal always to protect life, liberty, and property, to promote God, family, and country, and to do so on your radio in the traditions of our founding fathers. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, we use the blueprint for liberty, the supreme law of the land. The Constitution for the United States of America is our guide. As you know, we reject revolution unless it's a Jesus revolution. Then we're in because we follow the Prince of Peace. And, man, if we got a barn burner broadcast today, I just tell you what, be ready, okay? Incredible guests coming up in seconds. But first, our co-host of the day, Lance Migliaccio, the Big Mig brother. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Hi, Lance.
Hey, good morning, Sam. Good morning to the Liberty Roundtable listeners. Excited to be here. Of course, always tip of the spear from our end. You know how we do it, Sam.
Amen. Taking care of business, ladies and gentlemen. TheBigMig.com is available on weekends on your radio. Check it out, or on demand at TheBigMig.com. They're also all over Rumble and X and everywhere else. And give us kind of a thumbnail of what shows are coming up this week for you guys.
Yeah, we're rocking and rolling. We've got a great show today later on Rumble at the Big Mig Show. It's biohacking versus biojacking with Dr. David Alfie. He's doing some really, really unbelievable work. It's got to do with sleep patterns, people having a better life. But, of course, as always, we've got the Crypto Power Hour today, the number one crypto show on Rumble, and that's going to be airing at 3 p.m. It's every 3 p.m. on Wednesdays and Fridays. And we'll have the rest of our week. And, of course, on Friday, the number one finance show on Rumble. And that is the Global Finance Forum, powered by Genesis Gold Group. Exciting show. If you want a financial roundup, if you want some predictions, we talk about bricks, bullion, Wall Street, you name it. If it's finance, we talk about it. So always an exciting week. We're always stacking up interviews. So I appreciate you giving me that shameless plug slot there, Sam.
Hey, man, and by the way, we're going to be adding more of the shows, the Big Mig shows, not just the Big Mig, but the Crypto Power Hour and Finance shows. We're going to be doing more for that on radio, so keep an eye out for that as well, because after Radio Live, it's turned into podcasts, and so there's a lot good going on. Keep an eye on thebigmig.com for more. Quick story before our guest as well, Lance. Sarah Palin, she was in a big old lawsuit. The New York Times, in my opinion, committed libel against her. It was all about elections, and she was talking about, getting rid of certain candidates, and so she had this thing that kind of, I guess you could say, put the candidate in the crosshairs, and so they went all ballistic and said she was trying to kill everybody, and anyway, that's the summary. The bottom line is then they went to court, and the judge literally betrayed everybody. He said, I know the jury's still working on deliberating, but when they come back, I'm just going to negate what they have to say. And so it was kind of a mistrial the first time, then it went back. Anyway, now Sarah Palin loses again. Sarah Palin loses defamation case, defamation retrial. Jury finds New York Times not liable. Now, you could say, well, Sam, come on, don't you support the courts? Well, that depends. I support the courts when they're doing what's right, but when you have a judge create a mistrial like that, like I don't care what the jury says, I want to just negate what they say. And then you have the New York Times, big money. Multiple trials, it's what, in New York City or New York where there's, it's not in Alaska. So how are the people in New York City, a bunch of liberals or whatever, going to be Sarah Palin's peers? It reminds me of, let's just say that a sheriff goes to jail and then you have a jury and nobody's in law enforcement and they're all women in a liberal venue. That's what we covered yesterday with Sheriff Richard Mack. You've got this sheriff, his name is Scott Jenkins. They say he took bribes. He didn't. It's all a fabricated case. But see, he's being tried in a very, very liberal situation. And I don't see no one's in law enforcement. No one's in there's hardly any males in the group, just a bunch of women that are liberal in Charlottesville. It's not even in the county that he was in or anything else. And it's okay. When you do all that, I don't see how you get fair trials. You just get rigged juries is what you get with dishonest, manipulated instructions by the judge who thinks he's the law above the law lands.
You know how I feel about our legal system right now and our judiciary. It's always hard for me. Number one, your jury is supposed to be sequestered, from a jury of your peers, and that doesn't happen. And of course, these weaponized, judges. When you become a judge, my opinion is you have to really be nonpartisan. You have to leave your politics. When you put on that robe, you should be hanging up your politics at the door. But that is not what we have. We have this, system that's in place where we are installing judges not based on their cumulative record, not based on their fairness or their propriety or their ethics or their integrity. It's based on their politics. I mean, look at the Wisconsin, Supreme Court, election. Over $93 million was put in by both sides to try to take control of that position. Of course, the Democrats won because that Democrat judge openly said that she was going to redistrict so that she could remove 2 Republican seats. This is what it's all about. It's all about politics anymore, and that's not what the judiciary is supposed to be. The current stuff that's going on with Sarah Palin and the current stuff that's going on with Donald Trump across the country, where they believe that they can control the president of the United States through these lawfare judicial decisions, I don't know. We have to put an end to this, Sam. There's just too much of it. These judges, I think one of the biggest errors in the whole system is a lifetime appointment, brother.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And the problem is, if you really study history, it was intended to be lifelong service upon good behavior. And you see these activists from the bench literally thinking they're gods, literally thinking they can do whatever they want. The next headline that relates thereto says this: Judge blocks Trump's attempt to dismantle Voice of America. That's a New York Times article, but what I find interesting about it is this. Why do I have to fund my radio network, and then I have to fund NPR or Voice of America or all these other government-owned media enterprises to compete with myself? I mean, this is insane, and the judges just go along and block Trump as if there's no authority anywhere except for, hey, you can just spend us into oblivion and force us to compete with ourselves. And, I mean, it doesn't even end, right?
Well, now you're talking my language again. Liberty Roundtable Live and, of course, the Big Mig Show. We don't have one of the 14 or 15 magic money computers. I'd love to have access to that. Sam and you and I could have the largest networks in the country. I just print us a quick $1 billion, not ask Congress for oversight, and just go ahead and issue us some money, and we'd be rocking and rolling. But that's the problem. The airwaves and the mainstream media are controlled. It's a controlled operation because we saw that. We saw it through USAID, just one example. Look at the money they're giving Reuters, Politico, social media influencers. We're not getting into that money. It's a one-sided finance scam. It's controlled narrative. And at the end of the day, stopping this weaponization so that we can brainwash America, it has to be done. And what Donald Trump's doing is right. But of course they don't want it. Of course the judiciary wants to stop it. Of course they want to continue all these black budgets and foundations and super PACs and NGOs. They do,
but what needs to happen is we need to understand these judges can be impeached, and they should be. I mean, in addition,
exactly.
The judge also ordered the government to halt its efforts to shut down 2 other government-funded outlets, Radio Free Asia and the Middle East Broadcasting Networks, which I find very interesting. So, we got to fund all this around the world, and I got to fund all that as a taxpayer and compete with myself. I mean, this is insanity. But Trump can't stop it because of the clown judges. And until Congress and others start impeaching judges, we're not going to gain any ground.
I said something yesterday to George when we were talking about it on our show. I just said, look, I'm at the point where I'm just ready for Donald Trump to tell the judiciary just to pound it. We're not going to listen. I'm done with this. It's a weaponized judicial system. But, this is what happens when you put lifetime appointments in place, when you put things in place like absolute immunity. Only God should have absolute immunity. Where do these people get off giving themselves demigod status? It's not equal application of law. It's not equal protection on the law. There is no rule of law, and that's the problem with what we've done. Politics have invaded, and they're controlling all these judges across the country. They're controlling the secretaries of states. They're controlling the prosecutors. And at the end of the day, we're not getting fair rulings. What we're getting is a system that is damn near not impeachable. You just can't get the right thing done. And of course, it's slowing down all the fixes, and it's slowing this administration's success to fix things like they need to be fixed.
Amen. We need to impeach these judges. We need to call Congress to account. Remember, we can remove all 435 members of the House every 2 years. Focus on that, people. But what we need most is education. Go ahead and skip the break. This is just too good. What we need most, Lance, is education. Our guest is probably one of the greatest educators in the world these days. Do you want to do the introductions?
You know, I do. I was talking to Chad yesterday, getting him ready for the interview. And I told him, I said, I don't know if you recognize why I want to do these interviews and why I want you on the radio show and I want you on our show and I want to get you on many other shows. It's because I really believe in what he's doing. He was born in Newport Beach, California, and he's got a really interesting background. We're talking about Chad Stewart. He's an international award-winning best-selling author, global strategist, and creativity educator. He founded the prestigious Britfield Institute, dedicated to creativity and literacy, and Devonfield, a media empire committed to the highest quality in education, publishing, and film production. And he comes from a background of being a previous investment banker. Chad worked at Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, just to name a few. He received a Bachelor of Arts in British Literature and European History from Brown University, earned an MBA from the Boston College, and is pursuing a Master of Science in Advanced Management and a PhD in Strategic Innovation at Claremont Graduate University. He's now based in San Diego. He's a strong supporter of education and the arts, professor of Furmanian School of Business, PLNU, past board president of the San Diego Ballet. I mean, this guy's done it all. And what's incredible is what he's done with this Britfield book series. There's no reason to leave him backstage. He's got much to talk about. He's probably one of the most interesting guests I've had on the Big Mig Show as far as his breadth of knowledge. It's just unbelievable. Let's get him in here.
Hi, Chad.
Great to be on. Thank you.
There's so much to talk about. I want to talk about the Britfield series, but we've got a bunch of time to do that. Let me tell you where I want to start this discussion.
Sure.
After my research on your incredible work and everything else, I've decided that the creativity crisis should kind of be the crown jewel to kick off all discussions, Chad.
I love it.
Because
Okay.
the creativity crisis is serious. Are schools killing creativity? The answers are resounding. More than that, they're creating not even group think anymore. They're creating group sheep, aren't they?
Correct. Yeah. Let's kick it off with just some numbers. We've been in a creativity crisis for over 30 to 40 years, probably longer. It's been kind of a downward spectrum with creativity. Number one, on one side, creativity is the most important skill set in the world, and that's based on research that's out there right now. It's not engineering, it's not mathematics, it's not legal, it's not medicine. We could talk about what computers and AI is going to do in replacing all of those fields. It's creativity. It's number one. Number two is communication. Number three, storytelling, believe it or not. But we've been in a crisis for decades. And there's an interesting gentleman by the name of George Land, and he was hired by the government to create a creativity test because they had analytical tests. They had all these other tests. And he was a genius in his field. And so he did it for, adults in these certain areas in the government. And it was so successful, he took it out into the school system because he was kind of curious, where children are at a young age and then how they grow older. And so he tested over, thousands of 5-year-olds, and 98% of them were testing off the Richter, geniuses. So 98 out of 100 5-year-olds, little geniuses. And isn't that true? Aren't 5-year-olds amazing? Gift of God, creative, smart, inquisitive, just their minds are amazing. He went back, tested the same group at 10 years old. It dropped down to 30%. Then went back and tested the same group at 15 years old, and it dropped down to 12% creativity. So 12 out of 100 were testing to have a creative capacity. So in that 10 years, from 98 to 12%. Then he went out and he actually gave the test to 280,000 adults, average age of 31, and it was 2%. And so you're just seeing this massive decline in creativity. But the one thing that George Land said is you could get your full creative capacity all the way back to 98%. Doesn't matter how old you are. You just need to work at it. But to continue on this theme, I'm just giving some ground basis here, some facts, some statistics. Dr. Kim, she wrote The Creativity Crisis. It was a great book that came out about 5 or 6 years ago. She did a massive deep dive research into over 30,000 students and scores, and was tracking it for decades. And this is what she found. And every year, as she was testing this in 10 key areas, if you can imagine your sort of L graph and coming down at a 45-degree angle, every single year, kids, children, students were declining in these major areas. And her research concluded that since the 1990s, schools have killed curiosities and passions, narrowed visions, lowered expectations, stifled risk-taking, destroyed collaboration, narrowed minds, killed deep thoughts and imagination, forced conformity, solidified hierarchy. As a result, children have become less emotionally expressive, less energetic, less humorous, less imaginative, less talkative, less verbally expressive, less unconventional, less lively and passionate, and less perceptive. I'll stop
and
there.
Mr. Stewart, I want
yeah.
to throw this out too, because I'll tell you how you can gauge it all. Believe it or not, this relates directly to laughter. You know how many times kids laugh in a day? And how many times adults laugh in a day? When you take away creativity, before you know it, there's no laughter because you're kind of turned into a drone, right?
Yeah, the one that always gets me was, as a result, children become less humorous. And I thought, man, that really hurts, because isn't laughter wonderful? I mean, can't you be in the worst mood and then you hear something funny or watch a funny show, and it's like, have you ever had those deep laughs that just go right to the soul? And it's like, oh my gosh. There's a funny,
you get a stomach ache and you say stop, but at the end, even though your stomach hurts, when you're done, you feel much, much better, don't you? And this really taps in, Lance, to our emotional well-beings, for starters, right?
You know, nothing that Chad's saying surprises me. You know, as a child, you know, I grew up in neighborhoods where sarcasm and laughter were a second language. That's all we did all day, was joke around and chop on each other. You know, I grew up in Fordham Road in the Bronx, so you had to have that language to survive on the street. But it didn't matter whether it was adults or children. I grew up around a lot of adults because of the you know, upbringing I had, and everybody was always joking around, smiling, and having a good time. I don't see that now. You know, you can even see it on social media, the negativity and kind of the whole operation of the influence op that I see that's being run on all these different platforms. It's frightening, Chad, and you know, like as we've spoken about so many times, you're right over the target, but it's frightening when you really break it down like you just did.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And on the other side, creativity is the number one most important skill set in the world. And in fact, creative applicants are preferred anywhere from 5 to 1 to 10 to 1. Because interesting enough, people with a music background, especially in Silicon Valley or in the tech industry, if you have a musical background, somewhere it's on your resume, they're not necessarily asking a direct question, but it's like, yeah, I played an instrument or I was part of a band. You'll be hired 10 to 1 because they know people that have a musical background are better under fire, better managers, better under crisis, can think outside the box, better leaders. And they qualify in all these other areas because of the musical background. And I find that quite fascinating. But back to the humorous thing, I find myself sometimes, you know what I mean, like if you're kind of in a mood, I'll just pop on YouTube and I'll watch like outtakes from Saturday Night Live, you know, like the ones where they break up.
Watch Cheech and Chong, huh?
Yeah, or that, or there's one of the funniest ones I've ever seen. You guys maybe have seen it. It was a newscaster, and he was trying to introduce this two-legged pig that was at this little elementary school, and it had wheels on the back, and he was trying to introduce it, and oh my gosh, the guy broke down and couldn't get through the segment. And I'll be honest, that's one of the hardest times I've ever laughed. It's something about someone else laughing that's just almost infectious. So.
Creativity, ladies and gentlemen, is critical. Now, listen, Mr. Stewart, through his national school tours, has traveled 9,000 miles, 23 states, presenting at over 200 schools to more than 50,000 students. Do you find as you travel around the country that it's different around the country, or is it just same all over the place, Mr. Stewart?
What's that now? I'm sorry.
Do you find when you travel and speak at all these different schools in all these states, is there a big difference? Like, I'll give you an example.
Oh, no, that's good. It's good.
A good friend of mine, Dr. Scott Bradley, for example, teaches this principle that, you know, the bigger the population, the more propensity to socialism. The bigger the population, if you add a university into the mix, quintuples that trend towards socialism. So I guess the question is, do you find when you go out to, you know, more rural states or more conservative areas, is it the same all over the country, or is it different?
It is definitely different. Now, with the children, ages 4th, 5th, and 6th. They're extraordinary and they're amazing. And believe it or not, it hasn't really, from my understanding and research, hasn't filtered there yet. Meaning, I've been at schools in Oregon or Washington, Texas, Louisiana, Nashville, Oklahoma, Colorado, and I've been at private, public, Christian, Catholic, homeschool, charter, and I found the kids really across the board amazing. Meaning, I didn't get to this hardcore liberal school in, let's say, Washington public, and the kids were not really asking very creative questions, or they were kind of quiet or fidgety or whatever. Across the board, I didn't have one. I presented over 200 schools in front of more than 40 to 50,000 students, so I didn't find any issues or problems with the children. But I will say it is horrific at some of the schools, and you come into liberal states and the influence is definitely seen there, especially on the West Coast. But again, my focus is, and a lot of the teachers are great teachers, but they're stuck in a system. Some have drank in the Kool-Aid and need to be removed from schools, and they will be. We're in an educational reformation right now, which is exciting across the board. We can talk about that. We're in a creativity renaissance right now because they've pushed back decade after decade, and creativity is now exploding. And we're in a homeschool revolution. And so those are all three interesting topics. Believe it or not, since 2020, the homeschool market was kind of like around 3-4 million. It's in the last 4 to 5 years, it's up to 10 to 12 million people are homeschooling. That's a revolution. That's an educational reformation. You take that many kids out of these socialistic, communistic institutes or factories is what they are, and you start to destroy the entire system. Go ahead.
Lance?
Yes.
What do you say? The homeschool revolution's here. Now, I like to say this. I've got 8 children, 4 boys, 4 girls, and I haven't put a single one of them in government school and never will. So we homeschooled them all. We put them in private school. That's another sad tale. I have to pay for the government schools plus pay to raise my own children and school them, too. Yeah. It's insanity. But we've homeschooled and private schooled our children, never put a single one in government school. So I like to say single-handedly we've saved taxpayers millions.
I was really fortunate. My family had me in private schools my entire education. And, of course, I was homeschooled a lot. My mom participated a lot when we were struggling in one course or another. She would literally spend hours and hours at night helping us with it. I think that makes a gigantic difference. I mean, can you blame these parents? This system, of course, thankfully, the Board of Education's gone. But ever since the Board of Education took over, all the numbers tanked across the board. And it did it at grand scale. And of course, now, just like you mentioned, the universities, when you get into there, it's a socialist, empire. What they want to teach people isn't really about having an open mind. It's about having a closed mind on one side of the political spectrum. So, yeah, I think homeschooling is the way to go. When people talk about it, when we have people in our chat on our show over on Rumble, and somebody brings up, what do we do about this? Because we talk about, let's face it, the DEI, inclusive garbage that's been funneled and pumped into the children. It goes all the way through even onto social media. It's frightening. I don't think you can trust these teachers to do the right thing because they go onto TikTok and talk about how they're running these clandestine ops of how they're going to give your children all the information to transition, as an example. Are you kidding me? That's not a discussion that should ever occur, in my opinion, until somebody's 18 or 21. And they can't buy a gun. They can't join the military, but we're going to talk to them when they're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old about transitioning.
Hold on, we're flat out of time this segment. Amen to Lance. This has got to stop. I just say when in doubt, yank them out, ladies and gentlemen. You can't trust these clowns. They're perverts. They'll hate your children. They'll turn them into drones or absolutely hate God, family, and country. That's what they do because they're godless institutions. When we get back, I want to talk to Mr. Chad Robert Stewart, founder of the Britfield series, one of the most award-winning book series in fiction. He's transforming literature and education. It's incredible. To learn more, Britfield.com or BritfieldInstitute.org. You're listening to Liberty Roundtable Live, hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use. Talk radio at your fingertips with Lance Migliaccio, Chad Stewart, and yours truly, continuing in seconds on your radio.
Proclaiming liberty across the land. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomason. He is certainly no fan of the Federal Reserve Chairman, but President Trump says as far as he is concerned, Jerome Powell's job is safe.
I have no intention of firing him. I would like to see him be a little more active in terms of his idea to lower interest rates. This is a perfect time to lower interest rates.
The president's statement is music to the ears of Wall Street. The benchmark's trading sharply higher this morning. Southern New Jersey is burning, a huge wildfire in Ocean County near the Jersey Shore. Earlier, the blaze forced several thousand evacuations, also closed a stretch of the Garden State Parkway, which has since reopened. The Doge mentality arrives at the Department of State. Secretary of State Rubio tightening the belt, at least partly for ideological reasons.
In a statement Tuesday, Rubio said the sprawling bureaucracy created a system more beholden to radical political ideology than advancing America's core national interest. Rubio then said redundant offices will be removed and non-statutory programs that are misaligned with America's core national interest will cease to exist. He then added, "We will drain the bloated bureaucratic swamp." Rubio said the reorganization will bring the department into the 21st century. Tasha Stevens reporting.
Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro describes President Trump as being very gracious during a phone chat over the weekend. Mr. Trump called Shapiro to talk about the recent arson attack on the Pennsylvania governor's mansion in Harrisburg. They spoke for about 15 minutes, discussing the attack as well as a host of other topics. And watching Wall Street this morning, stocks are sharply higher. The Dow is up just over 1,000 points, for a gain of more than 2.5%. The Nasdaq ahead 632, and the S&P is up 159. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Financing a home, especially in today's market, is one of the biggest decisions you'll make for your family. Work with a mortgage company that puts you first. I do. Work with a lender founded on biblical principles like do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. I do. It's Mike Gallagher for the only mortgage company I've used for almost a decade now when financing or refinancing Fellowship Home Loans. I'm friends with the owners, Mike and Brian. I even have them on my show occasionally. I know the care their team puts into every single customer. I can personally tell you that it's a smooth, stress-free process. And that's due to Fellowship's level of service expertise that puts you in the right loan for your family and your goals. There's a reason Fellowship Home Loans is flooded with 5-star reviews. Whether purchasing a home or a cash-out refi to consolidate some higher interest debt, you can trust Fellowship Home Loans. Start the process. Make the call. 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-6453. Fellowship Home Loans, mortgage lending by the book.
Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 819382.
Looking for an IT partner that truly understands your needs? Managed IT Services is the answer. We meet with you regularly to discuss your goals and form a tailored technology plan. Our customers have called us a trusted advisor who delivers. When it comes to IT, we do it all. Firewalls, cloud storage, server migration, and more. Say goodbye to long-term contracts and hello to a team that earns your business month after month. Call 801-706-6980 now and let Managed IT Services transform your IT experience.
Have you ever had great honey? No, I mean really good, all-natural, raw honey? Well, now you can, thanks to localhoneyman.com. We can ship out our locally made honey all across the U.S. So don't worry, you won't miss out. Plus, Local Honeyman has so many different flavors, like Utah Wildflower, High Desert Delight, Happy Valley, and Blackberry, just to name a few. So purchase your delicious raw honey today at localhoneyman.com.
Imagine a school where faith and integrity are at its center, where heritage and responsibility instill character, where educating both hearts and minds brings about academic excellence. There is a school in American Fork where character and embracing the providence of a living God are fundamental, where students' national test scores average near the 90th percentile. Based on LDS principles and a love of country, now in our 39th year, American Heritage School is accepting fall enrollment for kindergarten through high school. What would you do for your child? Give them an education that will prepare them for life. Located east of the temple in American Fork, American Heritage School is a remarkable and affordable alternative. Visit us, find us online, or in the Yellow Pages. American Heritage School in American Fork.
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
One of the most award-winning book series in fiction, Britfield, ladies and gentlemen, is transforming literature and education while blessing individuals and families worldwide. The author, Chad Robert Stewart, with us, born in Newport Beach, California, writing the Britfield series. 4 books out of 7 are already released. They're already started on movies and more. Britfield.com to learn more. We'll talk about the Britfield Institute in seconds as well. They're just getting started, ladies and gentlemen, at Britfield. They're really taking the world by storm. It's basically stealth education, helping people understand fundamental principles, learning it without even realizing. You're just reading a great book and just enthralled with the material in the book. And Tom and Sarah are the key characters in the book. And you basically go through this thing, and they're on the run, and they basically start out in an orphanage, and they bail from that cursed place. And the whole series is about their being chased by the cops and this detective. And it's a great thriller. But on the way, fundamental principles are taught. And that's really kind of the key to the exercise here. How do you teach people fundamental principles and do it in a way that they just eat it up? And I'm just telling you right now, Mr. Stewart has that done, sir. What do you think? How did that all come about for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. As I said, I was a British literature major, European history major. So that's kind of my background. And lived off and on in England for 2 years, traveled over to 50 countries, especially Europe. And so how do you tie in all that education and excitement into books? And then actually, since I was 18 years old, was writing scripts, and again, movie scripts. And so, I took my beginning class and my immediate class and then advanced class, and then I started writing feature-length movies, and I was working with professionals in the industry. And so I've been doing that for decades, more for myself and to create films that eventually I hope to do something with, but for the art of writing. And I tell you something, script writing is hard. Basically, every page represents a minute. So if you have a 2-hour movie, you have 120 pages. You don't have 150. You start on the action, you end on the action. It's based on the 3-act structure. You have plot points. You have your inciting incident. Your description is very tight, 2 to 3 lines. And I say all of this that 20 years of experience went into Britfield and Lost Crown, book 1. 384 pages. And we've had 12-year-olds that have read this high-octane, fast-paced adventure series or book within 5 or 6 hours. I've had a 15-year-old that read it in one sitting. My literary agent's daughter, she got the manuscript and she gave it to her daughter and she read it in one sitting. It's just like I couldn't read that much. But so I design it very strategically. I don't have any extra fat, if you will. I think most books out there right now, novels, fiction, have about 100 pages of story and then 200 pages of description, and it's like yada, 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 and going on with all this. And it's unnecessary. It has nothing to do with the story. It doesn't move the story forward. And so what you have with these stories is every single line in there needs to be in there. I move the story. I build the story. There's no lull in the middle. It's just a 45-degree angle upward and until a conclusion. I have twists and turns. You have absolutely no idea where it's going. Surprises, and so it's a lot of fun. So in that story, it takes place in present time, so that's very important, right? This futuristic nonsense, this post-apocalyptic books out there like The Hunger Games, really? Kids killing kids? I heard that from a student, 6 years ago, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's awful. Or this world of witchcraft, which just disconnects kids from reality, makes them feel less than they are, right? So our books take place in current time, real places, real location. We tie in geography, art, architecture, culture, and history. And then it's based on family, friendship, loyalty, and courage. If you were to ask me what's the number one theme, it's family. It's the importance of family, the drive of family, and not always by birth or blood, but by connections and friendships you make along the way that become your family. And that's the theme. That's the driver with this great royal mystery. And, so it's just it's a fast-paced adventure series. I've had a lot of children, especially boys, 14 or 15, that are reluctant readers, or have never read a novel, and a librarian will give them Britfield and Lost Crown, and they'll read it in 2 or 3 days. And they'll come back and I say, I want to read book 2. And there's a wonderful story at the school that I visited in Louisiana, and the librarian was giving it back to me. And she said she's out, after school in the parking lot, and some mom stopped her car, rolled down the window and said, hey, you're the one that finally got my son to read, and all because of Britfield. Thank you. So we get these kind of stories out there, which are exciting. And I'll say the editing process, it's 20% writing, and it's 80% rewriting or editing. And on my last edit, when I'm doing, and I switched from computer to paper. And then so at some point, like my last 3 drafts, I'm doing a paper edit, and I'm only printing 2 or 3 pages at a time. I'm sitting down, I'm reading it on the paper, reads very different. And on my last final edit, I try to get rid of 1 sentence per chapter or per page. What absolutely can I get rid of? What doesn't need to be there? Is there anything that's extra? And a lot of writers will kind of make that mistake. And I'll give you an example. It's like, the dialogue might be, okay, go do that and get that done. And then you have that last line, okay, I'll make sure I do. And it's like, you don't need that last line, right? You enter late, you leave early, start on the action, you end on the action. And so you just nip those little lines. Anything that absolutely doesn't need to be in there. It's kind of a house of cards. I pull it that tight. And so there's no fat, there's no extra, there's no over description. I'll stop there.
It's important to understand the tighter you write, the harder it is to get the points across in a meaningful, productive way. But when you do, it just makes the text sing, if you will. Now, you brought up the difference between reading it online or in a digital format versus a paper format. That's a big change, too, that's making it harder for people to really connect, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'll be honest, and these are some of the facts, and they're counterintuitive. Number one, the ebook market is flatlined around 8 to 10%. It's not going anywhere. The paper market's growing at 5 to 7% every year. Independent bookstores are making a comeback now, growing at 5 to 7% every year. And I'd say 90% of the children, at least at my age group, that sort of middle school, young adult, love the paperback book. Love the hardcover, love the paperback. If I'm at schools and selling them, it's hardcover. If they're buying them online, it's usually paperback. But they love to hold it. They love to read it. They love to own it, which is exciting. And I think that's great. So,
Lance?
I think the proof is in the pudding. The demand for these books, Chad's very conservative, but I think they're going to surpass the sales of Harry Potter. It's imminent. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, it tells you that the market is hungry for what Chad's doing. And I think the way he went about this is so unique because you look at his financial background. And, of course, he felt like his creativity was being stifled and decided to go down this route. But it's the way that he strategically planned how he was going to do this. And I think the way that it's presented to these students, they love it. When he drove all those miles across the country, and for anybody that's ever traveled domestically by car and tried to go to so many states to make presentations, you can imagine that he really got in touch with what students liked about his books, and that's able to even allow him to perfect his craft even further. And I think when you take it, there was a term I coined years ago that I thought was applicable to what Chad does, and it's fiction reality. By taking fiction and keeping it interesting and then tying in the reality of like the dangers of artificial intelligence or quantum computing or AI manipulation, a push for a one world digital currency, you're taking real world events that maybe these students, likely these students wouldn't be exposed to, and you're exposing to them in a manner that's not only palatable, but that's so insightful. I think that he's done something so unique here. I can't say enough positive things about it.
I'm grateful for that, Lance, too. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and I've said it so many times. And I think really this is what the country needs right now. It's a unifying educational message, and it allows these students to get a taste. Of course, Sam, we've talked about this on this show so many times. It's unusual because you and I have such a depth of knowledge. You've been doing radio for 30 plus years now. I've been in the media game for years and years and years. I'm studying and looking on social media news cycles domestically and internationally all day long. It's rare that I meet somebody like Chad that no matter what topic I bring up, he's so well read on it. It's just one of those things that you're just really surprised about because it happens so rarely when we have guests on our show.
I appreciate that. Let me interject, too. I mean, what you have right now worldwide is an 80 to 90% gap for family-friendly content. So we're in this matrix world, flashover substance, Truman Show, with fake statistics that we're a divided nation in the close elections, all nonsense. You know, Trump won. We all know that Trump won by 80% 2020, 90% in 2024. Fact. All that will start to come out. We're not that divided of a nation. You just have a lot of these satanic parasites that own the media, social media, and all these fake statistics sites. And so you got to be careful in navigating. With that said, you know, it's easy for me to plug it in, but I'm also a researcher. I'm a strategist, history major. So, okay. So I traveled a great deal of the world, and I do that, number one, for fun, but I do that from a strategic standpoint. Check out different countries and the cultures, and so I'm bringing all of that in there. But we're now translated into Polish with a big publisher in Poland, out of Warsaw, and I'm excited because we're going to do very, very well with this series. We're already selling thousands and thousands of Britfield Lost Crown books in Poland. How cool is that? I'm not even there. I'm not doing any marketing. But I knew that the story would resonate, especially with Eastern Europe, and now book 4 takes place in Eastern Europe. We're going to knock it out of the park in Japan, and we have a major publisher that's interested in buying the rights. South Korea, that's going to be our beachhead for Asia. We've got a major publisher there that's interested in buying the rights. We're going to do extremely well across all that area, all through Brazil, all up through South America, and then obviously in the United States and around the world, because it's a timeless story. It's a timeless classic. It's triumph over tragedy. It's a David and Goliath story, and it resonates with the minds and hearts of everyone. So I'm not sitting here trying to push a specific agenda or trying to offend you, but it definitely has a clear definition between evil and good. And like Lance said, some of the topics that's interwoven throughout the series is the dangers of artificial intelligence. No one's talking about that. Quantum computers and data collection, AI manipulation of the stock market, push for one world digital currency. Gee, that seems current. The hidden group that dictate world events. They're called the Committee in my book series. Fake wars and fiat money systems. That's interesting. Compromised governments and agencies such as CIA, Interpol, Mossad, and MI6. That's in my books. Super soldiers and DNA splicing, social credit scoring to force obedience, and the dangers of CCTV cameras. And like in China, there's 2 for every one person. And they have 14 different markers.
And we're going to dig into all those details. So help you understand, this is a fictional series, right?
Yes.
However, you used to be a banker, and however, you have a pretty good handle on what the issues of the day are, liberty versus tyranny. And even though it's a book of fiction, though, it's chock full of facts and details and reality checks on all kinds of topics that are really critical to understand as they try to take us off the cliff. Their goal is to create a global tyranny. And so you, even though it's a fictional series, you have real life examples, right?
I do, and I've been doing research in that particular area for over 12 years. We all had a moment of waking up. I think for most it was 2020, where something just didn't seem right. So I've been relearning history for 12 years. And so what you have on one side is this fun, exciting, fast-paced, adventure series, Britfield Lost Crown series, great for children and adults. Our youngest reader is 7, our oldest reader is 93, and 55% of our global audience are adults. And on the other side, all this natural history and research that I have, and somehow they just came together beautifully. So it's not like I'm forcing this stuff in there, but it just fits the narrative. Like book 2 takes place in France, and that's like a whole different ballgame. I call that my Empire Strikes Back. And then book 3 is in Italy. And how can you not kind of get into, Italy, the Renaissance, the bankers during that time, influence, culture, all of that. And then you get into Eastern Europe. I start in Vienna. I end up in Russia, Moscow, Russia, book 4. Now I'm writing book 5 in Asia. So it all ties together really beautifully and threaded through.
And you get cultural reality checks and facts and all that. You really immerse yourself in the culture along the way. That stuff's all real, ladies and gentlemen. So I want you to understand that, yes, it's fiction for the plot and fiction for the fast-paced, but it's detailed in terms of the education. That's why he calls it stealth education, because it just happens along the way. when you get done, you have this knowledge of places and time and people and circumstances and history and cultural realities and concerns and, the enemies of liberty expose themselves in very real ways. Lance, out of all these different topics here, what topic do you think is the most critical you'd like to discuss?
I think compromised governments and agencies.
They're worldwide, aren't they, sir?
They absolutely are. I mean, when you look at the sophistication of what is going on globally, I think that's really at the core of so many of these other topics. So I think that's the one we should just delve into.
Corrupt governments around the world. You used to be a banker, and as far as I can tell, that's kind of where the beginning and end of corrupt government is, because once you have unlimited money, I mean, you can literally buy anything in this world with money. You can compromise anybody with money, and it's this unlimited purse they have that's the real core of the problem. Sir, what do you say?
Yeah, and I remember about 18 months ago, and it's different for all of us. We sort of have different moments of waking up or seeing what we need to see. You know, the scales are finally pulled from our eyes. But I realized, like 18 months ago that the government, as is Washington, D.C., which isn't even part of the United States, but its own entity, and the Constitution was compromised. But it's just a laundromat, like just a laundromat. I mean, it's just absolutely a laundromat. It takes the money in and then puts it into everyone else's pockets. And finally, praise God for the current administration. Have you ever seen more lunacy or an audacity of where money is being spent? Mostly abroad. The countries, it's like, transition, $25 million for, this or that in either Egypt or wherever. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. And then the money that's being spent on all these quote unquote nonprofits. I cover that in book 2. I cover the scam of nonprofits, because 90% of them are fake and false. Another way to launder money. All the big ones, you know what I mean? You're putting in, you're donating $1,000 and maybe 3% of that, or $3, is going to help feed a kid or cure something that's already been cured for 100 years in organic medicine. So it's interesting. I cover that. I cover it's interesting because a main character in book 2, Britfield and the Rise of the Lion, is Inspector Fontaine. She's 30 and very attractive, naturally beautiful, smart, youngest, of Interpol, kind of making her way all the way up, and she's kind of in that world. You know what I mean? And doing her best, and until she sort of meets, she's in charge of finding Tom and Sarah, who took a ferry from Britain or Dover to Calais. And this is like six months later, and they can't find them because the ferry sunk. And then all of a sudden she starts to find out through Detective Gowerstone and then Oliver Henry's uncle, really what's going on behind the scenes. And she finds out how compromised Interpol is. And basically what it is at the very top echelon of that agency, is where all the dirty dealing is being done, and really what they're doing is they're taking out any of the competition or the lower levels, number one, to make it look like they're doing something, and number two, to get people out of their way. And so she's out there making arrests, and she's doing their job, and so I actually talk about that. I thread that through. It's very light, but she has that kind of hitting a wall moment and realizing, she's feeling it, that her life for the last 10 years has been worthless. You know what I mean? I've been working for one of these organizations, and I'm trying to get drugs off the street, and they're putting them back on the street, but 10 times. You know what I mean? I'm confiscating illegal money, and yet they're printing it and giving it to all their friends. You know what I mean? And so I actually touch on this. I actually talk about these subjects, and so she finds out how compromised Interpol is to such an extent that they put a hit on her. She's in her 3rd-story apartment in Paris, and she's on the laptop, and all of a sudden she smells smoke and hears this crackling sound, and they've lit the whole place on fire. And she gets out of there, of course. But, it's pretty intense.
So it reminds me of a book a friend of mine wrote. His name is Pat Shannon, and he wrote a book that's entitled Everything They Ever Told Me Was a Lie. And what's interesting about that book is he documents all these conspiracy theories and all these things, and he basically grounds them in many ways to fact and shows the impossibility of the cover-ups and the things like that. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is because it seems like the Britfield series has a lot of that. When you get done, you realize that, hey, most of what we've been taught is really a lie, and you have to unlearn so you can actually learn. Chad?
It's true. And that's why I said I have been relearning history for 12 years. And that's tough, too, because I did deep dives. I was a history major at Brown University. I got a great education there. I was reading, biographies and all this stuff. And then can you imagine for the last 12 years, I'm starting to relearn stuff. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm sprinkling it in there. And I'm telling you something, children are waking up, especially through the Britfield series. I get emails, I get letters from 12, 13, 14-year-olds that are saying, is the committee real? And our secret society is real? And it's all out there, right? And again, whether they get it or not doesn't matter, because it's, subconsciously, consciously, is again self-education.
And think about it; it comes in stages. Yeah. You might plant the seed, sir,
sure.
right? And they don't get it now, but then later they're like, "Whoa, hold on!" And Lance, I think that's the key: is we're planting seeds amongst the youngsters to not trust the establishment, really,
and there's
not
no
worthy
doubt
of our trust.
You're opening up a door that gives them that first peek. And, if they want to go deeper into the rabbit hole, that's what I love about what Chad's done. He's given them so many different topics that are based on fact. There's no doubt that there is an operation. There are secret societies. What you mentioned about Interpol and many other agencies, my background as a government contractor, I saw it firsthand. The corruption runs deep. People don't realize what these governments, what their real operations are behind the scenes. They keep it segmented. They try to keep it in the dark. But, of course, now more and more that's coming out. And, gentlemen, I just got to say, I've got to head over to do the Big Mig show on Rumble, so I apologize. I wish I could be here for the whole thing, but I'd actually booked an interview that I couldn't do anything about. So I just wanted to thank you, the Liberty Roundtable listeners. Sorry, I'm cutting out.
I want you to give us a good parting question for Mr. Stewart.
My parting question would be, Chad, you've put so much time and effort into this. What's the most frightening thing as you were relearning history? What was the thing that you were like, this can't possibly be true? I think the listeners would love to hear that, because 12 years of study, they say it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert. I know you're way deeper into what you're doing than that. So share that with the audience, and I'm on my way out. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Lance.
Thank you, Lance.
Go ahead,
thanks,
Mr.
Chad.
Stewart.
Oh, yeah, I would say the extent of children abduction and what they actually do with them and how they're used, and I'll leave it there. But that was the most diabolical, horrifying.
Yes, sir. So you're saying, help me understand this then. You're saying, say it one more time so I kind of understand.
How extensive human trafficking is, and child abduction, and what's happening with these children, and how they're being used.
Well, and I think the United States is trying to do some good about that. Tom
Sure.
Holman trying to do some good and everything. But to me, they haven't even scratched the surface. Believe it or not, if you pay attention, it's everywhere around the world.
Yeah.
And the United States is the biggest market, right?
One of, yeah, definitely. But to switch back to what he's saying, I'm thinking with Lance, I'm thinking, just think about Dan Brown and the Da Vinci Code, right? And I remember reading that, I guess 10 years ago or maybe longer. And what he was covering, and he's kind of bringing us into a very interesting world. And I'm definitely thinking about Angels and Demons, his third book. And it was the first time I ever heard about CERN, right? And then all of a sudden, haven't you been hearing a lot about CERN in the last couple of years and what they're up to? And it's like, should they really be trying to do what they're doing, right? But I'm saying it's like he did his research, and some of it's fiction, especially with the Da Vinci Code and what he was pushing or propagating. And that's why he did it, to sell the books, to shock the world.
It's fiction, but truth is stranger than fiction, believe it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, and so again, too, these are really fun, fast-paced. James Bond meets Bourne meets Mission Impossible meets Narnia. They're fun books.
Yeah, topped off with Jack Reacher, right?
Yeah, they had a little Reacher in there. You know what I mean? And I'm very aware of the kids, because in book 1, Britfield and Lost Crown, the main characters of Tom and Sarah are 12. In book 2, they're 13. In book 3, they're 14, and they grow. But I've got a wonderful cast of characters, 20-something, 30-something, 40-something, Professor Hainsworth in his 70s, Henry's in his 50s. And so really it's not like a kid's book, if you will. Set aside for the beginning that takes place at an orphanage.
It's kind of like Christmas. It's for ages 2 to 92, ladies and gentlemen.
There you go.
And beyond. Hang tight. Hour 1 in the can. Hour 2 coming up. We're talking to our guest, Chad Robert Stewart, award-winning author. To learn more, Britfield.com, BritfieldInstitute.org. One of the most incredible award-winning book series in fiction. It's transforming literature and education. while bringing encouragement to children and families worldwide. Hour 1 in the can, Hour 2 coming up. God save our republic.